right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second session within the seven-session series of Striving to Thriving with WEthrive.live, alongside of our support with IWL, Integrating Women Leaders. I have just a few things to share before we get things rolling this morning. You can check out the recording from last week's session, Swimming the Sea of Uncertainty, on our Women's Network Indie Chatter page, or Rebecca's YouTube channel. You can go straight there, where we're going to house all of our recordings, even including today. You'll likely notice as well internally for those Salesforce folks that we posted the Rebellion and Resilience Guide for you to download. And if you have the ability to print, feel free to do that now if you haven't already. If not, I'm going to add the direct link, which is public, even for those that are joining us today outside of Salesforce. You should still be able to download it. So look to the chat window of the Google Meet now, so that you can go grab that guide to follow along with today. On the Salesforce side, you have myself. I am the Lean In Circles Chair for Women's Network here in Indianapolis, Kylie Carnes. We also have Kelsey Jones, who is our ruthless leader, amazing president of our Women's Network Equality Group here for Salesforce here in Indianapolis. She also sits on the board for IWL and will be representing that amazing organization today. For WeThrive.live, we have the CEO and founder, Rebecca Fleetwood-Hession, who was our guest speaker last week to kick things off. And she'll be assisting us with fielding any questions that are coming in on chat. So please don't be shy. Let us know your thoughts. And if you have any questions, please share that as well. And for Alissa, as she'll be leading the discussion today, Alissa Bartenbach, that is going to share her wealth of knowledge on rebellious resilience. So I will now, are we going to kick it over to you, Kelsey, first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Kylie. And thank you, everybody, for joining. So quick introduction before I throw it over to our amazing Thrive guides from WeThrive.live. So first and foremost, just a little bit about myself. So Kelsey Jones, as Kylie mentioned, I am the president of the Women's Network, which is one of our equality groups at Salesforce. So within our Salesforce hub, specifically in Indianapolis, we have over 500 people, both men and women of all kinds that are part of the Women's Network. And that essentially just means that all the programming that we run, whether it's through our LGBTQ community, our Women's Network community, we have a community called Bold Force, those all create these equality groups. And so I get the honor of leading a group of about 10 women that create programming just like this, what we're walking through today. But what I'm super excited about is we now have this opportunity amid COVID, amid this global pandemic. So how do we come together as a community and really take our offering of this programming to our extended, what we call Ohana, which is our family at Salesforce, to our community, to our family, to our friends, to all of you. So I'm excited. Kylie has spearheaded this initiative with Rebecca from WeThrive.live, and we partner with Integrating Women Leaders here at Salesforce for our Women's Network. So I'm excited to really bring all of these groups together to really talk about just some topics. We all have a ton of different webinars and virtual series that we get on, but this is really your guys' time that we wanted to share and just to give back, to make sure we're all taking care of ourselves during this time. So with that, in Salesforce's close alignment, as Kylie mentioned, I am on the board of Integrating Women Leaders, which is a local non-for-profit in the Midwest that accelerates the advancement of women to drive both individual but also organizational growth and impact. So what I absolutely love about this, and Salesforce does a great job of allowing you to not only do your everyday work, but we get 56 hours of VTO, which allows you to lean into your community, into your organizations to give back. So it's really, I get to bring my everyday work, but also something I'm truly passionate and feel strongly about, which is women, community, how do we build each other up and support each other? So with that, I'm going to kind of intro a little bit and kind of tee it up for Alissa, which is our Thrive guide that'll be walking through Rebellious Resilience today. And kind of speaking of that close alignment, again, we're bringing together multiple communities. Last week, we were actually able to practice this exact topic for today of resilience in real time, as we all waded through and figured out the reality of hosting virtual events. So thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Alissa. Thank you, Alex, for your partnership with Salesforce and IWL, and also for your just true spunk and your realness and leadership for this Striving to Thriving series. So this is we're getting real, we're communicating. Please feel free to be as candid and in your responses through chat, engage, keep it interactive, but we're really excited to kind of jump into this topic today. But before I hand things over to Alissa to guide us through this topic, I wanted to share a few things that have helped me kind of wade through uncertainty as we're now in, as we mentioned before we started recording, our 10th week of working from home. So we're now in this double-digit phase of working from home. So one of the things last year at IWL's kind of their conference in Indianapolis, the morning keynote speaker was Michelle Gillian. And she is a former CBS morning anchor, if you're familiar. And she also wrote the book Broadcasting Happiness. And we had about 20 different women from Salesforce who attended. But I have 4 kind of bullets that I'll walk through here really quickly, just to kind of think through how we are getting through resilience, how resilience can help us with broadcasting our happiness. So first and foremost, I think this is true for all of us, having positive mindset, action to bounce back from failure and setbacks. But what does that really mean? I look at it as failure is simply a data point. It is a data point that actually is a simple action that happens. It's not going to define who we are. If anything, what a lot of people got back from one of her discussions at that keynote was this setback is actually a setup for where we want to go. And I don't know about all of you, but I think I learn the most when I fail and fail quickly and learn from it and provide that disguise. So what we do then is she also wrote a recent article, and I'll share this in the chat right after this, is resilience is about how you recharge, not how you endure. And this really spoke to me during this time, because she said that, you know, the key that we speak to, the key to resilience is really trying really hard, but then stopping, recovering, giving ourselves that time to rest, relax, recharge, and then trying again. So it's about acknowledging what we're going through, giving ourselves that time to reflect, which is exactly what we're going to do today with Alissa, and then being able to recharge. She even quoted in here around Ariana Huffington. So I know many of you from Salesforce are on the call. We had her on another discussion on our Leading Through Change webinars. But I absolutely love this stat. She said, we sacrifice sleep in the name of productivity, but ironically, our loss of sleep is costing 11 days of lost productivity per worker per year. So that's almost 2 weeks of lost, that is 2 business weeks of lost productivity. But if we put that into another stat, that is $62 billion a company loses every year to lost productivity, because we're not giving ourselves that willingness to rest, to recharge, to reflect. So with that, I want to turn it over to Alissa, and we're going to provide you the rest of this 50 minutes today, a time of recovery, so that you can start to train yourself to be rebelliously resilient. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing, Alissa, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Kelsey. So good morning. So excited to be here with everyone today. And that was a great tee up. And I want to read the article and learn all the things. So I love this topic for a lot of reasons. But what is so interesting to me is I actually really came to this idea of wanting to dig into what resilience was about 3 years ago, and have been doing this work personally for myself. And I'm excited to share it with you today, because every time I talk about it, I learn more, I learn from you, and I also just get reminded about how sometimes the most simple things can have the greatest impact. So today might not be something that's like earth shattering that you've never heard before, but maybe it's some things you just haven't put top of mind, made a priority, or aren't putting into action. And like Kelsey said, today's really about just creating some space. As we go through this today, I hope it feels like we're all just sitting in a living room together and sharing our thoughts and maybe having a conversation with friends. Or maybe as you're going through the guide and you're writing some notes to yourself, it's just a conversation you've needed to have with you that you haven't had the space to do. So excited to jump in. But before I do, just share a little bit about myself. So my name is Alissa Bartenbach, and I have been working in HR, specifically in leadership development and talent and org development for about 15 years, and have been working with organizations. The things I love to do the most are work with what I like to call messy teams, or also to work with women in leadership. And so these are topics that for me, I know Kelsey said what she's passionate about is creating a space for you to really grow personally and professionally. That's the stuff I love. It's the things where we can really build into ourselves and not only show it better in our own lives, but have it transfer to the workplace. And so hopefully today we can kind of look at things in both ways, not just about what might be coming up for you personally, but also some things into the workplace as well. And I also want it to be super interactive. So if you can, go ahead and click on the little chat box. That way we have our chat windows open here. And to start, maybe just go ahead. I'd love to see the amount of women who are on this call who are also in leadership roles. If you can, maybe just type your name. If you're someone who's on the call and you are also leading people right now. All right, so we got names coming through. Several of you who are leading. And I don't know about you, but that is like an extra layer. I have a team right now that spans kind of 3 different HR groups, and it has never been a tougher time to lead. And so I'm constantly trying to figure out, hey, when am I leading my kids, my family, leading at work? And then how do I create a space to lead me? And so I hope that today you have a little bit of time to just figure out what is important to you and what are some things you can do for yourself. And you can see the guide here. And so if you don't have this printed out, grab a sheet of paper and you can just kind of jot down your thoughts as we go along. Give you a second to grab that here before we jump in. And maybe while we're getting settled, we're going to first dive into this idea of rebellion. And for if you are on Instagram, you can find me at Rebel Single Mom. And this whole idea of rebellion really started for me about 3 years ago, actually almost 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years ago next week, where very suddenly I found myself in a situation of being a single mom. Literally overnight, my whole life changed. And I spent several months, not just only in shock, but also trying to figure out what was I going to do with this new life I had been given. And out of that became really 2 things that I became passionate about. Rebelling, how to do my own life, my own way, and how to be resilient in the process. And the last year, I specifically worked in 2 ways to really up my own development game. I became a resilience coach. So that's a passion and a focus of mine. But then I also had the honor of being trained by Brene Brown and went through her Dare to Lead program. And so today, as we go through here, you're going to see a combination of content that comes from my own ideas about how we can rebel as women and live a life that's as unique as we are, how we can also be resilient. And then you'll see some of the content that also comes up if you're a Brene Brown fan through some of her Learning to Rise and her Dare to Lead work. So some of the topics we're going to talk about today are getting a little bit clearer on who you are and what you deserve, how to give yourself permission, how to figure out whose opinions really matter. We're going to talk about setting boundaries. We're going to talk about creating a resilient vision, self-compassion, and then we're also going to talk about really how to remember and know that you are resilient for moving forward. All right, so if you want to scroll down here, we will jump right in. And maybe as we first dig into this topic of rebellion, talk to me a little bit about what does rebellion mean to you? If you had to describe it, what would you say is a rebel, or what does rebellion look like? Maybe we can just add it to the chat here. All right, so Alex, someone who doesn't conform, doing the unpopular thing, not following exactly what I was taught growing up, going against the norm, saying or doing the unexpected, kind of challenging, getting even outside your own comfort zone, breaking the rules. Yes, love to break a good rule. All right, these are great examples. And these are some of the things that aren't always valued as well. And so it makes sense why it's tough for us sometimes to do them. But really, the idea of rebellion is doing what's good for you. And I believe if you're saying, gosh, but yeah, I can't choose myself, I believe that that's really where so much of our own work has to start. And even as you sit here today, your phone will be going off, emails will be going off, kid might be running in the room to ask for something. I guarantee it'll probably happen to me even while we're on here. But we have to start with recognizing, number one, that we are worth it. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I get really overwhelmed with this idea that we only get one life. And so it's super important to take charge of it and to live a life that's just as unique as you are. And so the first step that we're going to go through today, you'll kind of see we have about 13 little squares here on the guide for you. But I just want to take a minute for you to start jotting some things down. In order to figure out how we start living that life that's as unique as you are, you have to really get to know yourself. And so I want you to think about, what are the things that you actually really like about you? And what are the things that really give you energy? And also, what are the things that you deserve? So just kind of do a brain dump. Just start writing the first thing that popped to your head. And it might be a little bit quiet here on our side, but I want to give you the space to think and to write and to get to know you. One of the things I know is that, especially a group of women that's as amazing as all of you are on here today, the potential for you to learn more from each other is greater than learning from me. And so I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the things you're writing down? What's the stuff that you love about yourself? What are some things that you deserve out of this one life you've been given? Put them in the chat for me. These are good. Katie, yeah, pushing through in order to follow a dream. Yes, you definitely deserve that. And that's some resilience right there. Alex, yes, you are funny. You sure are. Mm. I love my positivity. I deserve respect, joy, and peace. That's a good mantra right there, Linda. That's something to be saying to yourself all day. I love that. I'm open. I like to learn from others. I deserve a world that is safe for myself and my family. Yes. Yeah, these are good. These are good. And how often do we really stop to be able to remind ourselves of who we are, and also to be able to really say out loud the things we know we deserve? There's so much power in that. And what I want you to do today is just kind of get your brain going. You know, my goal anytime doing anything like this is, gosh, if one person just takes away one thing. But I'd love for you to look at your list right now and maybe see, is there one thing that you wrote down here that you know is true, but maybe it really doesn't match the way your life looks? No, is there something that you love about yourself, but you're not really putting into action or owning as you go about the day? Maybe that's something that you're kind of hiding from the world. Or is there something that you wrote down that you know you deserve, but it's not a part of your life right now? If there is, just circle that one and make that be something that you decide to come back to and bring really into life. I think especially in times like these, it's super important to stay close to who you are. The situations we're going through right now, gosh, it makes us feel like there's really hardly anything that we know. And so it's more important to stay close to the things we do know. And starting with knowing ourselves is a great place to start. All right, so starting to feel a little bit more comfortable, hopefully, with owning who you are and how you are living a life that you deserve. Let's keep going down here a little bit and get to the idea of, hey, once we stand pretty true in who we are and what we know we deserve, that's when things start coming at us. Like sometimes that's not always something that people enjoy. And how can we be the ones who give ourselves permission without needing it from others? That's a pretty rebellious thing to do. Or how do we really stop seeking approval? That's a really tough thing to do. And so if you're a fan of Brene, you will have seen this from some of her work, specifically in Dare to Lead. But really the idea stems from, and if you've had kids or you remember back in school, anytime before you go on a field trip, you would have to get a permission slip to go. Your parents would need to sign it. And that whole idea kind of shows up in our lives where we find ourselves not just doing the thing that we know is right or the thing we know we need, but in waiting for other people to give us that permission or thinking we need to ask others for permission. And so I want you to think about, how do you just have the perspective of giving yourself permission? And I do this a lot. I write permission slips really for myself all the time. I have Post-it notes everywhere. And, you know, it can show up in the funniest ways. I went on a girls' trip back in November, which is so amazing to think about now, going on a trip with friends. And we actually had gone to a Rachel Hollis conference. And it was a group of friends that were all my friends, but none of them had actually met each other before. And on the plane, on the way down there, I realized, you know, with every single one of my friends, I'm the problem solver. I'm the one who, no matter what happens, I'll make a quick decision, I'll figure it out. And I kind of wrote myself this mental permission slip of no matter what happens this weekend, it's not going to be mine to figure out. And what do you know, shortly after we arrived at the airport, from issues with the rental car to issues with the Airbnb, even to finding the right location for where we were supposed to register for the conference. And we were only a few hours in that first night before one of my friends said, "What's wrong with you? You're not helping at all." And I had to tell the whole group, I should have told you, hey, I'm giving myself permission no matter what goes wrong this week. I'm not figuring it out. And they all kind of laughed, but at the same time, I don't know that they approved. But I had to do that for myself. That's what was going to give me the best experience there that week. And it was honestly the healthiest thing for me and being able to get the most out of that week as well. Sometimes I go into meetings and I write myself a permission slip to say, I won't be the one to make sure we come to an agreement. Because it's so easy for me to get into that place in the workplace where I actually don't end up giving my real opinion. I end up just trying to make sure that everybody else gets along. And that's not bringing my best value to the organization either. So take a second on this idea and write yourself a permission slip. Maybe it's something you're going through right now, or maybe it's just an idea of the permission you want to give yourself in order to show up in new ways or live in a way that's healthiest for you. So what do you need to give yourself permission for today? So write this down if you want, or put it in the chat. I'd love to see what kind of permission you're giving. Permission to just relax on the weekend and not be productive. That is huge. And that's something that you probably have to give yourself permission for over and over and over, to not always have it all together. Ashley, that's so good. Yeah, give myself permission to just know my own needs. Yes. Permission to not be perfect all the time. Yes, that's a good one to give up. I don't have to be strong 24/7. Yes. And you know what's amazing when you ask a friend about this, or when you see some things other women are writing, it's so easy for us to say, well, of course you should be able to give yourself permission for that. These all seem like really, really good things to be able to give ourselves permission for, but it's hard to do that for ourselves. The thing I do know, though, is that if we can't do it for ourselves, it's very unlikely that somebody will do it for us. And so this is awesome. These are really good. And a lot of common themes here too, I think, especially for women, of having it all together, having balance, being productive, getting it done. Most of you who are on this call are probably high achieving women. And so we all have that in common. Now, this is great. All right, so remember the permission slip idea, and keep a stack of Post-its handy. And when do you just need to kind of give yourself permission and have that reminder? All right, so we'll scroll down a little bit here. So one point is around giving yourself permission, knowing you don't need that from others. The other thing that we don't always need from others is approval. And so the idea here is called the Square Squad. And if you have the printout, you'll notice that actually on paper, this square is very, very small. And that's not an error. It is to really make you think. And without saying much, I want you just to take a second. And if you don't have the guide, just draw a 1 inch by 1 inch square. And then write the names of the people whose opinions really matter to you inside the square. And the way I like to think about this too is these aren't the people who love you despite your imperfections, but who love you because of them. All right, so I see it didn't take me long to do this. What was this like? And I'm happy if somebody even wants to go off of mute and talk here, that's fine too. Feel free to either answer or to put in the chat as you're going through this exercise of figuring out whose opinions really matter, what are some of the thoughts that came to mind? Oh, there we go. All right. So Linda, yeah, and this is a great question. How many of you put your own name in the square? Yeah, this is a really, really common one, that we forget our opinions really matter. Most of the time, this is when the majority of the women in the room, say, how did I not remember that? One of the funny things, I was speaking at a conference in February, and I asked this question. I said, hey, what was it like as you were going through here? And one of the ladies said, oh my gosh, I totally forgotten. There's not enough room. I forgot to write my mom. My mom doesn't fit in my square. And I said, well, let me tell you, my mom doesn't fit in my square either. So sometimes these people that you think should be in there, when you go through this, you realize, hey, you know what? Maybe they don't meet those requirements. And maybe their opinions don't matter. Situations come up in life, and this is when I come back to, whether I'm really upset about something that happened at work, maybe that I'm taking on personally, or maybe just kind of the way I've been treated by a friend. When I come back to say, hey, how heavy am I going to take this on, or how am I going to address this? A lot depends on whether they're in the square or not. All right, so one thing I do suggest that is a way to just take some of this work and start to positively use it for others. If you wrote down some people's names in the square today, at some point this week, reach out to them. Thank them for being someone who you can trust. Let them know they are someone for you whose opinion matters, and just thank them. We got to share some love to those people in our squad, because there's usually not many of them. And if you didn't write your name in there, add it. All right, you want to keep going? Let's see. All right, so I think our last point on the idea of how to rebel is around setting boundaries. And when you think about why this is kind of a point of rebellion, is because a lot of people don't set boundaries because of what can happen from them. A lot of times when we set a boundary, it doesn't make people very happy, and it doesn't always make us likable. And that's important to us, right? Is to be likable. But the thing that I often have to remind myself is, you're either choosing others or you're choosing yourself. And it's okay to choose yourself. Setting boundaries also can be tough because we feel like we have to over explain, or we have to give big reasons in order for someone to understand. And setting boundaries can be really simple. And I'm going to teach you a really easy process for how to do that. And just to kind of let you know my story, the first time I really tried this out, I've lived in my house now for almost 2 years. And the woman who lives behind me is a lovely older woman. She's not lovely. She's not lovely at all. She is always telling me what's wrong, what the kids are doing outside, things that need to be fixed outside the house. And every time I would go to step in my backyard, it was like she was there and she was hollering at me. And I actually had the best 2 weeks ever last June. I went and spent a week with Brene Brown, and then I took my kids to Disney World for a week. And I came back home. Normally I'm the carry the suitcases in, unpack them, start the laundry, get back to real life girl. And instead I was like, no, I'm going to be we're easing back in. I'm going to go lay on the hammock girl. And I opened my back door, and who was there but crazy neighbor lady. And she says, I'm not sure where you've been, but these trees are coming over the fence. And I just said, it's okay to say hello. It's not okay to tell me what to do in my own house. And she just kind of looked at me funny and got herself together and went back inside. And it's almost been a year, and I haven't talked to her since. So it it worked, right? But it really has to be as simple as saying what's okay and what's not okay. It does two things. Number one, it's not overwhelming for you to do in order to get it out and put the boundary out there. But then it's also something that's really clear for the other person to hear. And this is one where if you're in leadership or you're a parent or really in any relationship, this is super, super helpful language, not only for you to be able to ask for what you need, but also for the other person to hear it. This is a great one I do with my kids. As a matter of fact, before we got on here, I said, it's okay to have fun. It's just not okay if I hear you're fun. And so it helps them hear like what's okay, what's not okay. And I have a better chance of it actually happening. So before we jump in, just get your mind in a place to first think about, is there a boundary that you would like to set? And maybe just to help other people's brains get going too, let's put it in the chat. What's a boundary or a situation where you feel like, gosh, I really do want to set a boundary? Normally, like mother-in-law pops up pretty early in a chat. Mhm. Okay, so this is good. Limited time with my Italian sister who makes me a little crazy. Oh my goodness, yeah. I've lived the Italian family life. Luckily, I let go of that one in the divorce, though. I say I won on that one. So I feel you on the Italian sister. Being clear on how I need help with the kids for my husband. Women across the country are saying amen. I feel you on that one. Tracy, okay, this is good too. Not accepting calendar invites that are booked on top of other meetings. All right, so where's Tracy? Let me see if she's in the chat. Tracy,
I'm here.
Hey, would you
Hi.
be willing to walk through this for the group?
This is like a pet peeve of mine that is coming up a lot right now. So it was very top of mind. But
Yes.
I'm finding, especially right now, I just have so many meetings on my calendar. Nobody is like giving me any space. So I'm blocking my calendar in between space, and people are putting meetings on top of my blocks.
Yeah.
And I am like so politely, if it's a block and I don't have anything to do, I feel obligated to just do it, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
there's no good reason for me not to have this meeting, except I don't want to have this meeting right now. So that's been kind of something that's not kind of, it's something I'm going through literally even an hour ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the point in some of this is when we choose not to set a boundary, instead what we're choosing is to have resentment. Because it's one or the other, right? We either set the boundary or we say, hey, I'm going to choose to be resentful. And it's not allowing your best self to show up in that meeting because you asked for something you didn't get and your best self isn't showing up. So how might you, so we all agree with you. And yes, save the work blocks. They are so important. Maybe how can you say this if somebody were to ask and say, hey, you're declining this? What might you say using this form of boundaries? How can you put it in a what's okay and what's not okay?
So I've been thinking about just saying, I'm sorry, I have a conflict, like, and leaving it at that, even if the conflict is just a block.
Yeah. So, and I have done this, and I think there are people who might respect that. Maybe just for everybody else to try it out because they might be thinking, yeah, but if that's my boss saying that and say, listen, Tracy, that you've declined this 4 different meetings in the last week. When I set something out there, why are you declining? How might you push back if they were coming at you a little bit harder?
I don't know the answer to that. I would buckle and immediately accept all the meetings.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, and that's why it works, right? So, maybe, and this is me thinking on the fly too, but just to kind of use this format, because I think this does help the more pressure we get, or the more someone does not respect a boundary, the clearer we need to be. So be able to say, hey, it's okay for sometimes meetings to get set at the last moment, but I plan out my calendar in advance. So it's not okay to book over meetings that are already existing. And that helps us get to the root of really what it is. So this is just a formula that's super helpful to me. This is also something that as a leader, I go to a lot because it's important for me to be a leader who is very understanding and empowering to people. So I don't just want to always say no or have things done my way. And so this allows some freedom as a leader to be able to say, hey, these are the things that are okay. And then, hey, these are the things that aren't. And that can be even, one of the things I get a question about a lot in leadership development is, what do I say to somebody who's late to work a lot? And at the beginning of having a conversation like that, it can be as simple as, hey, it's okay that sometimes things happen on 465 that might cause you to be a few minutes late. It's not okay to be late multiple days a week. Because that's uncomfortable, having an adult to adult conversation like that about something you think, gosh, why can't somebody just show up to work? So this formula works in so many ways. And I think it's a little bit more empowering to you, but it can also be empowering to others on the other side of when you're setting the boundary. Any questions on this one? Okay, awesome. Yeah, for any of those husbands out there this week, they're going to be like, where did you go? What happened to you? Y'all set those boundaries. All right, so let's keep going down. Okay, so we're going to move into some resilience here. And part of resilience for me is about being able to just advance despite adversity. And I think the reason I became so passionate about this idea of resilience was really when I came to the point of realizing, yeah, this part of my life is hard, but it's not going to be the last time I face something hard. And if I can learn how to do this right now in the ugliest and messiest situation, then I can do it again, and I can do it again, and I can get better and better every time. But also wanting to live life in a resilient way meant I had to do it a little bit differently as well. And so we're going to talk through something that a lot of you probably have done, which is set a vision or write a vision statement. But we're going to put a spin just to get you thinking about how things might look a little bit different when you do it through a resilient lens. And so one of the things that I think is really important as we are going through uncertain times is to have kind of like a guidepost, to have something that helps you in the moment know what is best for you, what is healthiest or truest to you, or how do you really want to make a decision. And having a resilient vision is a great place to start. And so we're going to kind of walk through creating that. I wrote down a couple notes here around kind of why the resilient vision for myself, and I was thinking through why it's important. So it's something that guides you and helps you keep perspective. It motivates you to work towards something that's important to you. It helps you guide your decisions when you have to make choices. And it can also help you communicate clearly to others what you're about or what's important to you. And so one of the things I love you just to be thinking about here is, what is something that you want to achieve? And maybe it's something as simple as, where would you like to be braver in your life? And we're going to do two things as we go through this. Setting the vision isn't just about saying, hey, where do I want to go? It's also about figuring out what can get in my way as I'm trying to get there. And so the resilient vision is what is going to help you move closer to what's important to you. And the difference between just kind of thinking of a vision and having a resilient vision is a resilient vision needs to be really two things. Number one, it's got to be super, super short. That way, number one, we can remember it. It doesn't get lost in the brain. But also, it can be that in the moment reminder as you're needing to make a quick decision. The other thing is it can't be super, super specific. And this is hard, especially for those of us who are in the corporate world. You know, I was hardcore trained into everything being a SMART goal and super specific and measurable and actionable and timely. And so a resilient vision needs to be something that is more overarching, that allows it to be something that you can pursue, you can go for, no matter what is happening in your life. And so this was really important to me, number one, because anything else I was setting out to do, I kept feeling like I was failing at. I was going for something that when times got hard or when I came against an obstacle or when I didn't have the energy for something, I felt like I was letting myself, other people down, or I was never going to move forward. And so for me, I became really simple in keeping my vision to, and I have mine written here, to share my story and support women. And that even showed up in doing this session today. Between my job and this is my last week of my kids being in school. How many of you can believe we can actually say we have homeschooled our children? I mean, a goal I never had for my life. But things are coming in, opportunities and people asking you to do things. And having this resilient vision is what allowed me to say yes to today. It does two things: get to share my story and support women. That helps me make decisions. It helps me make priorities. It helps me to stay true to who I am. I want you to think for a second, what might a resilient vision look like for you? Take a second to think about that, and then I'd love to hear what yours might be in the chat. There's definitely some good ones coming in here. So Courtney, I love focus on people, not on to-dos. That is huge, and that's really hitting me as a mom as well, and a leader, because I always feel so overwhelmed with the list not getting checked, and not feeling like I'm productive enough. And every night I find myself talking as I go to bed thinking, yeah, but did you love the kids? Do they know they're loved? Did you spend time being present with them today? And so in the moment, to be able to say to yourself, I focus on people, not on to-dos, to keep yourself focused and showing up in the way that's truest for you, that's huge. I love that. I'm writing that one down. Thanks, Courtney. All right, so this is good. If you feel like you need some time to take this one and to really narrow it down, take the time to do that, and then find a place that you can put this as a reminder in the moments to help make decisions. And if it's going to get loud over here, of course, the grass guy is coming right now, who normally comes on Tuesdays. So we're going to roll with it if you can hear it. My apologies. All right, so let's scroll down just a little bit. The thing I want you to think about now is, let's say you get a super clear, resilient vision. What are some things that actually can get in the way of that happening? And I'm not sure if you're up for it, but Courtney, since we were rolling with your focus on people, not on to-dos, would you be willing to maybe talk through this one with me? Not sure if Courtney's.
Here we go. Yeah,
Oh,
sorry. It's
No,
always
you're good.
classic every day in every meeting. Like, why can't I find the button?
Well, thank you. And you look great. I love your hair.
Thank you. Thanks.
So cute. So one of the things that Brene Brown says a lot is what gets in the way becomes the way. And what it kind of means is we have to figure out, hey, what are those things that are going to trip us up or get us off track? Because then those are the things we need to find solutions for in advance. If we know what's going to come at us, then we can figure out how to attack those before they get us. And so as you think about your statement of focusing on people, not on to-dos, what are some things that could get in the way of you actually being able to do that?
I think myself and my own like little charge I get out of crossing something off a list. I mean, to me, that's like I get kind of a ridiculous amount of satisfaction from saying I accomplished something and I need to get past that. That's in and of itself isn't really valuable. So I think that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is getting over the idea that, I need to get back to everybody within a certain amount of time. And so my to-do list kind of keeps me a bit of a slave to that, where I'm like, oh, I've got to get, within 24 hours, I need to, make sure that I'm following up and not getting in other people's ways or that I'm dependable and all these things. But, as I'm reflective, if I focus more on people, I'm really focusing more on kind of who they are, what they need, how to be present with them versus whatever little task I think that I'm helping them with, which, it's in the end is probably not actually meeting their need.
Right. Yeah. No, that's so good. And I think when we have these conversations with ourselves, when we say, gosh, what is getting in the way of me doing that? We start to realize where we're putting our value. And there's a lot of self-worth and accomplishment and value that can come from a really long list with a lot of pretty check marks by it. I've always made fun of my mom because she would have a list and then I'd say, why does that just keep getting longer? She's like, oh, well, if I did something that wasn't on the list, I write it down because it feels good to check it off. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else is guilty of that. Sometimes I do it too. It does make you feel good. So we have to realize that the value of that connection with the person is more important than the value we're getting from showing all we've accomplished. So thanks, Courtney. That's so good. And I think this is just one as you, again, try to get clear on your vision that you're just honest with yourself about, hey, what's going to get in the way? Because it will show up. But if you call it out here early, you're going to be much more aware of it so that you are able to live your resilient vision. So thanks, Courtney. Appreciate that. All right, 5-minute time check here. All right, so for the next piece of resilience, pretty broad topic, I know, of self-compassion, but I love this quote from Kristen Neff that says, unlike self-criticism, which asks, are you good enough? Self-compassion asks what's good for you. And sometimes self-compassion seems like this really big, lofty, soft word. But I just want you to realize that it starts with the word self. Here again, this is something we can't get from anyone else. we can only give to ourselves. And so some of the things to think about here, and I know we've got to move through this quickly, but how are you criticizing yourself? There are things we find saying to ourselves pretty much all throughout the day. Normally there's a common theme. And so identifying what that looks like and what's something you can say to yourself that's positive instead, you'll realize you'll start stopping in the moment. That go-to phrase that you go to, you've got to replace it with something that is positive. The other thing, if you'll scroll down just a little bit, that I think is always a good one to think through is, what is something that you do for a friend that you also need to do for yourself? And most of you probably have done a lot of great things, even if it's as simple as, I'm reaching out daily, just seeing if people are okay. But how many times throughout the day are you doing a self-check-in to say, hey, how am I right now? How am I healthy? What do I need? And most of the time, the thing that we are doing for friends is the thing that nobody else is doing for us, because we're that friend. We're that friend that brings it. And so this is another one to get really clear on, something you're doing for others, but that you also need to do for yourself. And if we have to end, so I know we're short on time here. So besides self-compassion and what you say to yourself, the other thing, and I'm going to go up just a little bit. I'm going to stay on the square breathing, because what's really funny is I probably should have been voted the least likely person to teach a breathing exercise, because I used to think this was just so funny, and nothing would make me more mad than somebody telling me, just stop for a second and take a deep breath. Because I would say, how is that helpful? That's not going to help me do anything. But honestly, I think taking a pause and taking a breath is actually the most compassionate thing that you can do for yourself. And sometimes it's really all I can do in the moment is to say, I deserve, what I need right now is just to stop for a second and to take a breath. It's number one way to be kind to your mind, your body, and your heart. And square breathing is the easiest technique. And what I love about this too is that nobody has to know you're doing it. This specifically has been a game changer for me in meetings. I find myself a lot of times at a table full of men who enjoy going back and forth, and it's sometimes hard for me to get a word in edgewise. And square breathing has changed the way I feel like I show up at the table, and I use my voice. Also, my kids will joke with me. My son always will be like, oh, is she breathing? Because if I'm quiet, they can tell I'm a little centered. They know I'm trying to get it together. So square breathing is super easy. What happens is you breathe in for 3 seconds, you hold it for 3 seconds, you breathe out for 3, and then you rest. And you repeat this a couple of times. And if you take nothing else from today, as you go about the busyness of work, life, and all you're trying to juggle, be intentional about when it feels like too much, give yourself a pause and take a breath. Be good to yourself, be good to your body. And again, this one has been a game changer for me. And as you get off this call, before you jump to the very next thing, do this. Take a breath. Tell yourself that you're worth it before you switch to the next thing. And you can find me at AlissaBartenbach.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at Rebel Single Mom. The last page really goes through remembering times you were resilient. So feel free to walk through that so you know that you've done it before, you can do it again. And then here's some ideas for how you can keep going to remember some of the things that you learned today, to keep getting clear and challenging yourself, to reach out to your Square Squad and somebody that you can check in with, to keep your resilience going. And then most importantly, to make yourself proud. Everything you're accomplishing, doing, and trying, note your wins. It matters more than anything that you're proud of yourself and that you know you are worth having a life that's just as unique as you are. And so I crammed it in there at the end. Sorry we ran out of time. Any questions, or if anybody wants to walk through anything one-on-one, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to take the time to invest in you. And thank you so much for letting me be with you today.
Great, thank you, Alissa. And thank you, Kylie, for putting this on. A quick reminder for the next upcoming Striving to Thriving session is next Thursday, right here, same place, same time, Your Thrive Story. So join us next week. Thank you all for joining. Look for the recording on Badass Women's Council YouTube channel, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Alissa. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.